My name is Claire Whitman, I'm 29 years old, and I just discovered the most brutal way to get revenge on family who treats you like garbage. But let me start at the beginning. For 6 months last year, I lived in my parents' guest room. You know, the one stiff twin bed, peeling wallpaper, and a closet that permanently smelled like old Christmas decorations. It wasn't supposed to be forever. I didn't even unpack most of my boxes because I kept telling myself this was just temporary. My mother Susan had very different ideas. Here's how I ended up back home. I got laid off from my nonprofit tech job. Budget cuts, they said. For 3 years, I've been helping community centers go digital, setting up scheduling systems, getting seniors online, even helping veterans navigate benefit websites. I was proud of that work, but when funding disappeared, so did my paycheck. I applied everywhere. Remote jobs, contract work, positions way below my qualifications. I took freelance projects, web design, digital troubleshooting for local businesses, but the market was brutal. My savings evaporated faster than I expected, and rent in upstate New York doesn't forgive anyone. So I packed my beat-up hatchback and drove back to the same cul-de-sac where I grew up. Dad Harold greeted me like an unexpected houseguest, polite, quiet, awkward pat on the back. Mom offered a tight smile and immediately handed me a list of things that needed fixing. The thermostat was acting up again. The printer jammed every third page. The Wi-Fi kept dropping around 8 p.m. I didn't complain. I fixed everything. I set up new email filters for them, installed antivirus software, restructured their budgeting app, updated their online banking security. I even caught a fraudulent charge on Dad's debit card before he noticed it. They never asked me to do any of this, they just assumed I would. And I did. Susan wasn't mean in obvious ways. She didn't yell or slam doors, but every morning, she'd clean the already spotless kitchen like she was erasing me from it. She'd fold laundry with sharp, angry movements. When she passed my room, she'd pause just long enough to let the silence speak for her. My younger brother Eric came by maybe twice a month. He's 25, lives in Manhattan, works in finance, or at least that's how he introduces himself at parties. The second Eric walks through the door, Mom lights up like Christmas morning. There's my star. She beams. You look like you've lost weight. Meanwhile, I'm in the corner reconnecting the Wi-Fi router for the third time that week, completely invisible. Nobody said it out loud, but I could feel the tension building like steam under a lid. I wasn't home, I was a shadow, a reminder of something they didn't want to look at too closely. What I didn't know then was that the person they barely saw, the one quietly fixing their passwords, making dinner, keeping their digital life running, was the same person their entire system silently depended on. They wouldn't realize that until I was gone. It was a Sunday. The kind my mother used to call family days, back when we still used placemats and matching silverware. She made baked ziti, Eric's favorite, not mine. He showed up in a pressed shirt and expensive watch, greeted Mom with a kiss, and tossed his keys in the bowl like he hadn't ignored her calls all month. Eric Whitman, 25 years old, 4 years younger than me, but treated like he'd aged in reverse. He worked at some private investment firm in Midtown and always had new crypto terms to throw into conversation. Susan hung on every word. I set the table, careful not to chip the one dish with a crack down the middle. When I sat down, Eric looked at me like I'd crashed his private party. Dinner started normally. Mom asking Eric about work, Eric pretending to be modest. I kept quiet, focused on my food, eyes on my plate. Then it came. Susan turned to me, voice dripping with fake casualness. Have you been applying to any real jobs lately? I froze. I had literally told her the day before that I had 2 interviews lined up that week. I'd even let her read one of my cover letters. But none of that mattered when Eric was here. Before I could answer, Eric cut in without even looking at me. At some point, it stops being bad luck and starts being bad choices. I swallowed my words and my pride. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was electric, but only for me. They kept talking, laughing at something I don't remember. I carried my plate to the kitchen and ate the rest of my dinner standing at the counter with my back to them. I could hear snippets floating over. Needs to grow up, can't coddle her forever, embarrassing. They didn't whisper. They didn't have to. What hit hardest wasn't the words, it was how easily they came. How natural they sounded, like they'd been practicing. That night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about that cracked dish sitting in the sink that nobody else would touch. And I started wondering, what exactly had I become in this house? The next morning felt wrong. Not peaceful quiet, the kind that hangs in the air like smoke after something's burned. I was in the sunroom working on my laptop, finishing a website redesign for a local bakery. Their spring menu was launching, and I just uploaded the image carousel when I heard heels clicking on hardwood. Quick, determined steps. Susan appeared in the doorway. My mother had a way of folding her arms that turned them into barricades. She didn't knock, she never did. I need to talk to you. I looked up from my screen. Okay, you need to start paying rent. I'd heard this before, usually tossed between complaints about the electric bill and how I load the dishwasher. So I gave my usual answer, I will. Once this job wraps up, I'll send you something. They're paying you? She asked, already knowing the answer. Yes, she tilted her head. I'm not talking about someday. I'm talking about now. Today, I blinked. You want me to write you a check with money I haven't received yet? She didn't flinch. No, I want you to grow up. And then it came clean, sharp, casual. You're just a leech, Claire, living off us. And it's gone on long enough. That word leech landed like a physical slap. I wasn't ready for it. She said it without blinking, like it was a medical diagnosis. Like I'd always been that, and she was just finally saying it out loud. Before I could speak, she turned and disappeared down the hallway. She came back dragging a duffel bag I hadn't seen since college and dropped it at my feet. Go leech somewhere else. I stared at that bag, blue canvas with my name still stitched on the side from freshman year. I packed in silence. Laptop, charger, toothbrush. No scene, no yelling. When I stepped outside, the sky looked blue for the moment. The driveway to clean and perfect. I left without saying goodbye. Nobody followed. Nobody watched from the window, but as I walked to my car, I realized something crucial. I hadn't just been cut out of the household, I'd been erased from it. And not one of them seemed worried about what would happen when I was gone. They should have been. I didn't have a plan. Just a duffel bag, a laptop, and this tight feeling in my chest I couldn't name yet. The first night, I stayed with Lucas, an old college friend who still called me Whitman like we were working on a group project. He gave me the pull-out couch and clean socks, no questions asked. Just enough space to breathe. After a few days, I moved to my ex-girlfriend Ava's spare room. She's the kind of person who makes tea before asking how you are. We hadn't spoken in months, but when I texted her, her reply was one word. Come. That week felt like drifting between lives that used to be mine. Ava worked evenings at a community health clinic, so the apartment was quiet during the day. I filled the silence with freelance jobs, small websites, repair work, whatever came through. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I wasn't just fixing websites. I was fixing myself. Then, out of nowhere, I got a LinkedIn message. A recruiter from a nonprofit startup had found my portfolio through a project I'd done months earlier. They were hiring for a digital systems role, remote, full-time, benefits. I interviewed in Ava's kitchen wearing a blazer over sweatpants. 2 days later, I got the offer. It wasn't a six-figure Silicon Valley dream job, but it was enough to sign a lease on a studio apartment with creaky floors, a fridge that hummed too loud, and morning sunlight that hit just right. That first night alone, I sat on the floor with takeout Thai food and a half-charged phone. No lectures, no pointed silence, no one waiting to tell me who I wasn't. For the first time in years, everything around me was mine. The floor, the ceiling, the air, and nobody could throw me out of it. 3 weeks after moving into my new place, I was sitting at my desk barely more than a table with legs finishing a grant reporting dashboard for the nonprofit. The radiator was hissing, the overhead light flickering, but I didn't mind. Everything in that room, broken or not, was mine. That's when my phone buzzed. Missed call. Harold Whitman. I hadn't heard from my father since the night I left. Not a text, not a "how are you?" I watched the screen go dark, then light up again. Second call. Same name. I let it go to voicemail. A few minutes later, a text came through. "Claire, why is the bank account frozen?" I stared at it, confused. Then, I remembered back when I was still living at home before I became a LEECH, Dad had asked me to help modernize their finances. He hated phone menus and paper statements. He gave me access to their joint account so I could set up mobile banking, automate bills, link their tax software, and set recovery protocols. I became the secondary administrator on every single system, not to spend their money, just to troubleshoot. When things went wrong, that access had never been revoked. If anything triggered a security lockout, too many failed logins, suspicious activity, they'd need the secondary contact to verify their identity. That meant me. I didn't respond right away. I could picture the scene perfectly. Susan pacing the kitchen, arms crossed, voice sharp with panic. Harold poking uselessly at the tablet, cursing under his breath, holding the phone too close to his face while talking to customer service. I typed out a reply. Ask the LEECH. No emoji, no explanation. Just that. It only took an hour for my phone to light up like a slot machine. 5 missed calls, 3 voicemails, 1 message from Susan. "This isn't funny, Claire. Call your father back. We can't pay the credit card. Are you really doing this after everything we've done for you?" I didn't answer. I wasn't being cruel. I wasn't playing games. But for the first time in a long, long time, I had leverage. And I wasn't going to waste it. They showed up on a Thursday. I heard the knock before I saw them. My building has this echo where slow, deliberate footsteps bounce off the hallway walls when someone waits too long at your door. I looked through the peephole and didn't move right away. Susan stood there holding her purse tight to her chest like it might shield her from whatever was coming. Harold beside her wore a jacket too light for the weather and a tie that looked like it had been knotted in a hurry. I opened the door. "If you're here to yell, don't." They didn't. They walked in without a word, glancing around my studio like they couldn't quite believe this was where I lived now. It was small, yes, but clean. Light streamed through the window and hit the stack of paperwork I'd left on my desk. Nobody spoke for a full minute, then Susan cleared her throat. Her voice was softer than I remembered. "We need your help. 3 weeks ago, she'd called me a leech and thrown my bag at my feet. Now she stood in the center of my life, careful not to touch anything." Harold tried to explain something about the bank, about taxes, about how Eric had tried to help but made everything worse. I already knew. I'd seen the alerts. "We missed the mortgage payment," Susan added quietly. "There are late fees." I looked at her. She didn't look angry anymore. She looked tired. "That sounds awful," I said. "You must feel really stuck." She nodded. Then, almost in a whisper, "I'm sorry. No lecture, no justification." Just those 2 words. Harold echoed her, slower. "We didn't realize how much you were doing." I believed them. Partially. I think they didn't want to know there's a difference. They asked if I would come back, reset the systems, fix everything. They said they'd pay me for my time, that things would be different. I shook my head. "I'll help," I said, "but I'm not coming back," and I meant it. We spent 2 hours at my desk. Harold on one side, squinting at the screen. Susan on the other, arms crossed but silent. I walked them through everything, resetting login credentials, verifying identity through secondary recovery codes, relinking the tax software. I had to call tech support twice. Once to confirm a two-factor authentication code they'd ignored for weeks. Once to unlock the shop portal that Eric had accidentally flagged for suspicious activity. Susan didn't say much. Harold muttered under his breath every time a new security question popped up. "This is ridiculous," he kept saying, but he answered them anyway. When it was done, I leaned back and looked at them. I'll send over a document outlining every step, I said. And after that, I'm out. Susan frowned. Out? No more admin access, I said. No more late night calls. No more, Claire. The internet's down. You'll have to figure it out yourselves. Or ask someone else. Maybe Eric. Harold didn't argue. He just nodded slowly. They stood, gathered their things. Neither reached for a hug. I didn't offer one after. The door closed behind them. I sat at my desk and opened Google Drive. There it was, one last shared folder. Banking for Mom and Dad, do not delete. I hovered over it for a moment. Then clicked delete. Confirm ? Gone. No pop-up asked if I was sure. I didn't need it to. For a few days, everything was quiet. Too quiet. I thought maybe that was it. Maybe they'd respected the boundary. Maybe they'd let it go. But families don't really let things go. They just find new ways to spin the story. It started with a Facebook message from Aunt Cheryl. Hey sweetie, heard you moved out on your own. That's so great. Your mom said you've been distant lately. Just wanted to check in. Everything okay? Then came a screenshot from my cousin Trevor. He was in a group chat with extended family, and in it, Susan had written, Claire's changed ever since she got that new job. She's been cold, distant. I don't even recognize her anymore. All I did was ask for help and she acted like I betrayed her. Then Eric, my brother, who hadn't said a word to me since the account meltdown, suddenly emailed 5 paragraphs. Look, I know there's been tension, but Mom and Dad aren't perfect. Maybe instead of blaming them, you could try being more understanding. You had a rough patch, we all do. Doesn't mean the world's out to get you. Let's talk soon. Maybe coffee? I didn't reply to any of them, because none of them understood. This wasn't about one fight or one word. It was about all the times I was invisible until they needed me. A month later, I left New York entirely. My company offered a relocation bonus to join their West Coast expansion, and I took it without hesitation. Portland felt like breathing. The apartment was small, but the light was soft, and nobody in the building knew my last name. I joined a local tech meetup, made friends. Once a week, I volunteered at a senior center teaching people email, digital banking, 2-factor authentication. One afternoon, I sat beside a woman named Marlene, walking her through how to reset her Medicare password. She laughed, a little embarrassed, and said, "You're so patient." I smiled. Patience is all I've ever had. That night, I sent one last email. Subject: Update. Hi Mom and Dad. Just wanted to let you know I'll be relocating to Portland for work. I've removed myself from all financial systems and accounts. I won't be available for tech help going forward. I hope this new chapter gives us all some peace. Claire. No reply. Not even a period, but this time, silence didn't feel like punishment. It felt like freedom. I sat at my desk, opened a blank document, and wrote the first sentence of something new. Something mine. I don't need an apology. I just wonder, if I disappeared, would anyone notice I was the one keeping things running? What about you? Have you ever walked away and nobody asked why?